Not a lot of people know this, but when I was a teenager, I was on the verge of becoming a criminal. At first, I was illegally selling music, movies, video games, and eventually, I would walk into huge department stores and walk out with hundreds of dollars worth of electronics or clothing. I would then go on to sell these things for cash. Now, why was I doing this? Because I was poor. Not kinda poor, really poor. I spent the majority of my childhood living in a janky one-bedroom apartment where I shared a room with my parents. This place had a bug infestation that management would not fix and always smelled like crap for some reason, no matter how much we cleaned. Even though we lived in such a crappy place, my dad still had to take 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. Every morning at 3 a.m., he would go to the local newspaper office and put together newspapers for the day. Then he would deliver those newspapers by hand. He would come home at around 9 a.m. to get ready for his next job that started an hour later at 10 a.m. where he worked as a mechanic. He'd come home late at night exhausted from a long day of work and still try his best to hang out with me and my mom. To make ends meet, my mom eventually had to pick up that 3 a.m. shift as well. While this was all happening, I didn't really understand what poor meant until Christmas of 1996. I spent the previous few weeks leading up to that Christmas telling my parents I wanted a new bike, a new computer, some new video games, and a bunch of other cool stuff. What I ended up getting was a bag of assorted candy. At first, I thought it was a joke. I almost laughed like they were pranking me or something. I looked around for my real presents and there weren't any. When I realized that it wasn't a joke, I locked myself in the bathroom, fuming with anger because I knew that all my classmates would be getting what they wanted, so why couldn't I? What kind of parent gives their kid candy for Christmas? As I'm sitting there, I hear my mom knocking on the door, so I let her in. She sat down next to me and started to cry. She looks over at me, her eyes filled with sadness, and she says to me, "I'm so sorry." She told me it wasn't that my parents didn't want me to have gifts for Christmas, they just simply couldn't afford it. She explained to me that we were poor. And then all of a sudden, it made sense. The crappy apartment in a crappy neighborhood, my dirty old clothes, my worn out shoes, our empty fridge, the 3 a.m. jobs. For the first time in my life, I understood. We were poor. At that point, making money became my mission in life. I started out selling small things like music albums and the latest movies on Burns DVDs. But before long, I was shoplifting hundreds of dollars worth of electronics without even thinking twice about it. Until one day. I was on the way to the bank with my dad because he needed to deposit $1,000 in cash. So we go inside to do that, and as we're walking back out to the car, he realized that he still had $100 in his pocket. Without hesitation, he starts walking back into the bank. "What are you doing?" I asked him. Then my dad said, "I'm pretty sure I had exactly $1,000, so I'm gonna go see if they made a mistake." What happened next changed my life. We walked back into the bank and he told the teller to double check if they had enough cash from his previous deposit. After calling over a supervisor and counting the cash on hand, they discovered that the teller had indeed made a mistake. She accidentally counted $1,000 when my dad had only given her $900. At that point, my dad then hands her the missing $100. They thank him and we start heading home. I was blown away by this. My dad could have gone home with an extra $100 because of someone else's mistake, and he gave it back? I was furious that he would do this, especially since we were struggling so much financially. When he saw my frustration, he turned to me and told me something. The words that left his mouth are words that have stuck with me forever. He said, "Money is great to have, but that's not what life is about. Life is about giving value to the world, and eventually, you'll get that value back tenfold." He said that had he not given that $100 back, the bank teller might have gotten fired from her job, and that to him, losing $100 was worth saving someone's job. I thought about this for days and days on end, and eventually I came to the realization that he was right. Life shouldn't be about stealing and selling illegal things. Life should be about giving value to the world. As I grew up, this became my life mantra. So I grew up to be a really nice guy who wanted to give back to the world. And that set me off the path of becoming a criminal. And I have my dad to thank for that. But I still had a huge problem. I was shy, really, really shy. It kept me from raising my hand in class, from talking to every crush I ever had, from saying hi to new people, from trying new things, from going to new places. Sure, I was a really nice guy, but it was impossible for me to be close to even one new person because I was so shy. When we had to pick teams for group projects in class, my teacher would always have to pick for me. On the weekends, I would sit at home playing video games by myself because I didn't have anyone to hang out with. During lunch at school, I took my food into the library and ate alone every single day because I didn't have a single friend to eat with. On the outside, I might have seemed like a happy, goofy guy, but on the inside, I was tormented. Every day, I'd look around and see kids laughing and joking around with each other, and then there was me, alone. Sometimes, the loneliness was so bad that I thought dying would be a better option. By the time I got to high school, eating in the library was just a normal part of my day. I had accepted the fact that I was a pathetic loser, and I gave up on trying to change that. I mean, why bother? One day I ran into Lisa, one of the only girls that I was actually acquaintances with. We were definitely nowhere near best friends, but we had grown up together in a way. So after making some small talk, Lisa asked me where I was going to go eat lunch. The library? I pathetically responded. That's silly, she said. Come hang out with our group instead. So I did. And that was the first day I had ever experienced lunch with other people. They didn't even think twice about joking around with me and explaining inside jokes as they popped up. For the first time, I had friends to eat with. It was a huge milestone in my life, and I'm still good friends with most of them to this day. So at this point in my life, I had good friends and it felt great. However, my self-confidence remains the same. And this bothered me a lot. Because of this, I never had any luck with girls. Every time I had a crush on a girl, I thought the right thing to do was to buy her flowers and write her sappy poems. Time after time, I'd do this and I'd get the "let's just be friends" speech. This happens multiple times, and every time I would spiral into depression. One night I stumbled upon an internet ad that said, "Learn how to get more dates." I thought to myself, I need to learn how to get more dates, so I clicked on it. It took me to a website that said, "Buy this book to learn the 7 words that will win any girl over." Now, I was desperate, but I wasn't a complete idiot. It was obviously a scam. But this scam got me thinking, could I learn how to be better with women? Could I learn how to be more confident? I stayed up until 2 a.m. that night reading articles, watching videos, finding forum after forum after forum of guys just like me. And after reading a few success stories, I learned that it is possible to become a better version of myself. I spent the next few weeks reading everything I could on dating and confidence. I then used these techniques on friends and family, and to my surprise, it was kind of working. I figured out how to have conversations with people and make them laugh. As the months passed, I had a huge collection in my brain of pickup lines, snappy comebacks, and quick techniques that I could use. I started using these on girls, and at one point, I met a girl who had a mutual friend with me, and we started hitting it off. Within a few weeks, we were officially dating. This sounds like it's gonna have a happy ending, but unfortunately, she broke up with me because I was quote unquote too nice. I was devastated, but also confused. How could somebody be too nice? The problem was that although I was a nice guy, I wasn't a cool, confident person that people wanted to be with. So I went back to my online resources in hopes of figuring out the secret to true confidence. One day, I get a message from a random guy on a forum who wanted to meet up and go Sarge. Now, Sarge was the creepy word we used to describe going out and picking up girls. This guy only had 3 posts on the forum, so I was very hesitant. But at this point, I was so desperate to get this area of my life handled that I decided to take a chance and just say yes. On the ride there, my heart was racing, and there were at least 5 different occasions where I thought about making a U-turn to go back home. Somehow, I managed to continue driving and I finally made it to our meeting spot, a dirty, rundown Mexican restaurant with a half-lit sign. I awkwardly stood at the front of the restaurant, not knowing if I should be looking for this guy within the restaurant or waiting for him to arrive. Being the nervous wreck that I was, I decided to continue standing there and I hoped that he would come up to me if he was already seated somewhere. After about 5 minutes of anticipation, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned around and a less than average looking Indian guy timidly asked me, "Are you Kong?" I told him, "Yep, that's me." And with an awkward smile on his face, he said, "Hey, my name is Jesse." We didn't know it back then, but that moment in time was the start of a huge transformation for both of us. We would spend the next few years improving ourselves and eventually starting a successful business together using the skills that we learned. But in our first 2 years of knowing each other, our progress was very slow. We would try to meet up once a week to work on building our confidence in a variety of ways. In those 2 years, I did change dramatically, but still wasn't seeing the results that I wanted. I went on a few dates, and I even got a girlfriend, though it only lasted a couple of weeks. In terms of finding my sense of self-worth, I was still struggling. Though I knew what to do on the outside, I'd never felt that deep, true confidence that I knew I had somewhere inside. Then during a holiday weekend, Jesse tried to convince me to go out for 3 days in a row. I didn't want to do this because 1 day of rejection per week was already bad enough, so why would I want to go out for 3 days in a row? After over an hour of debating, Jesse somehow convinced me to do it, and I'm glad he did because this was another huge turning point. The first day was okay. The second day was a little bit better. The third day is when everything changed. It was amazing. Even though we still went through a lot of rejections, it didn't even faze us because we were so high on the adrenaline rush. We started having fun with it, and by the end of the night, we went home wanting more. This made us think, if we could feel that good going out for 3 days, how would our mindsets change with even more days? So soon after, we tried to go out for 7 days in a row, then 14 days, then 30 days, then 60 days. During our first 7-day challenge, as we called it, I was able to kiss a girl that I just met for the first time ever. During our first 30-day challenge, for the first time ever, a girl invited me home with her on the same night that we met. What happened during the 60-day challenge was so crazy that you would either think I'm a god or lose all respect for me as a human being. But I'll save that story for another time. Within the course of a year, I grew exponentially. Not only was I comfortably able to talk to any girl at this point, but I was confident in myself. It was now easy to talk to people. It was now easy to make friends. I had never dreamed of feeling this good in my life. Imagine if you woke up tomorrow and found out that you could fly. How incredible, how surreal do you think that would feel? That's exactly what I was feeling. At one point, I had changed so much that I would think back to where I was just years before and cry. Not because I was sad about my past, but because I was so happy about where I was at the moment. I used to be so depressed, so lonely, so insecure, so hopeless. I spent so many years of my life thinking that confidence was something you either had or didn't have. I was so close to getting caught shoplifting and going to jail, but instead, look at where I am now. To this day, I still think back on how far I've come, and it brings tears to my eyes. It's been nearly 10 years since I've started my personal journey, and I've learned a few really big lessons. Lessons that I wish somebody had shared with me when I was lost and confused. So because of that, I'm going to share them with you today. The first lesson is if you want to get good at something, you have to immerse yourself in it. It doesn't matter if you want to be more confident or if you're trying to learn a new skill, you need to be obsessed with it and practice it every single day. That's the only way you'll ever become great. The second lesson is to make failure fun. Everyone knows that you have to fail in life to succeed, but what a lot of people don't tell you is that you can actually make it enjoyable. If you're doing something because you have to do it and it stresses you out the whole time, then you're gonna feel even worse when you fail. But if you had a way to make it fun, then in the end, if you do fail, it's actually not a failure at all. The third and most important lesson I've learned throughout the years is to always give value to others. Not only will this help create success and happiness for yourself, but it will also help others in ways that you might not even know. And that, in turn, could eventually help the world. Because my dad gave that $100 bill back to the bank teller when I was younger, he changed the direction of my life and contributed immensely to who I am today. If it wasn't for him, simple pickup would probably not exist. So, my point is, give value to the world and don't expect anything in return. In the end, it always somehow pays off. So, that's my story, and thanks for listening. But now, I want to hear about you. In the comments, tell me about an experience that drastically changed your life or shifted your reality. I'll leave another story of mine in the comments as well. Also, there's one thing I didn't mention in this video. There was one girl that broke my heart into a million pieces and put me into one of the deepest depressions of my life. If you want to hear that story, click here and join our email list. You'll get an hour-long podcast where I go into more detail about my life, including the story of the girl that nearly destroyed my soul. So again, click here or the link in the description and check it out. You won't regret it.